Ay, cajone! Some estupido bandido has stolen my burro!
Look, senor, they left a mark.
A mark? You mean to tell me Zorro could have done such a thing?
No, senor. Movie critics.
Hello and welcome to Random Movie Time. Today's feature is the 1958 Disney movie, The Sign of Zorro, directed by Louis R. Foster and Norman Foster, and starring Guy Williams and George J. Lewis. This tells the story of a young man who arrives in Spanish California and decides to dedicate his life on avenging the innocent and pursuing the criminal element. Shannon, what did you think of this movie?
Well, I love Zorro. I've always loved Zorro. Ever since I was a little kid. There's so many great things about it. It has ships. It has sword fights. It has flamenco dancing. I love all of those things. And I love the fact that because it takes place in early 1820s Los Angeles. Back then it wasn't called Los Angeles, it was called the Pueblo de Nuestra something, Los Angeles. I don't remember the whole name, it was long. But I love that it has that kind of that feel. It's at that time apparently Los Angeles was only 138 people or something. It was less than 200 people in that place, and it really feels that way. And the Zorro is the son of he's a son of a rich man who has a nice house and everything, and Zorro has this secret dungeon, so not even his father or any of his closest friends or mates, except for his servant, knows that he is Zorro. So it has all the makings of a good adventure, and he's, it's very humorous, it's very entertaining. The bungling lieutenant, the quick wit of Zorro, and he's a friend of the people, says Zorro, which means fox. Zorro means fox in Spanish, which is very fitting because he sneaks around in his black masked outfit, and if he can not have confrontations, then he chooses that route, but he's an exceptionally good sword fighter. So there's some really good sword fight scenes in there and fighting scenes. One thing I found kind of funny was, and Tommy let me know this before we started filming, but apparently this was a bunch of episodes strung together.
Yeah, it was a TV series made by Disney back in the 50s.
Yeah, and so there was this flamenco dancer, and which I loved. I loved the flamenco dancing scenes. Like she was a joy to watch. But I'm like, why is there so much flamenco dancing in this movie? It's like every 2 scenes there's a flamenco dance. Now it totally makes sense because, you would see like a flamenco dance once every 2 weeks or something like that on the episode. Everybody does a great job, and everybody, the acting is really good. Again, when you look at these old serials on TV, like from the 50s and earlier, and even from the early 60s, you get that sense that they're coming from a theatrical background, and that's the feeling I get from this.
Yeah,
you can tell that they're, trained in the theater, so it really comes through. Horses, lots of horses. I love horses. Lots of cool horsey tricks. Jumping about and flying and whatever. One of my favorite favorite quotes in this film is, "Never mind the musicians. They never have any money." That's when somebody's trying to be a bandit and steal money from everybody, and they're like ignoring the musicians because everybody knows musicians have no money.
It's true as ever.
So true. For me, it's hard to say very much bad about this movie because I am looking at it in the context that it's set in, like in 1958, where I grew up watching Zorro and always loved Zorro. I've always been a swashbuckler pirate kind of fan, so for me it's really endearing, and it was really nice to see that it's not just nostalgic for me, but this was a very well done series. And it's nice to see that, revisiting it, that there still is that quality there. So I was really pleasantly surprised with it. I mean, of course, there's some tropes, but they're only tropes because they started doing them back then, isn't it? Like now, these things would be like, "Oh, come on, that's so tired." But back then, it wasn't tired. It was kind of new and adventurous. And of course, I mean, some of the Spanish accents are pretty bad.
Not as bad as mine.
Not as bad as yours. Well, the Viceroy's daughters was pretty bad. It was pretty awful. But, I mean, that's of the time. They, it would have been nice to see native Spanish people in those roles. But, 1958, they're not going to hire a bunch of Latinos to play Latinos. Come on. Might not be for everybody, but for me, it's nostalgic, and I think it still holds up to this day. What about you, Tommy?
Yeah, I liked it quite a bit. I think this is the first time I actually sat down and watched a whole Zorro movie. I don't think I'd ever seen one before. Of course, I'd heard about him. I'd seen clips of him, throughout the years, and always looked like a good movie series, but this was the first time I actually had the chance to watch one. I was surprised that it was a TV series. It felt a little bit, as you said, like, the musical numbers sort of being a little repetitive and things like that. But all in all, it felt like a pretty cohesive movie. Like, I think they did a good job of editing it together. It obviously was one story, it was serialized over many episodes, but they figured out a way to make it into one story very well. About the acting, yeah, the actors are good. You wouldn't call it realistic acting today. Like, this is, it was done very much for kids. The bad guys never got super evil. They never, threatened to flay people or something like that. Because, this was a Disney TV show. But one thing that impressed me about the actors, and probably because they are from the theater, as you said, is they had impeccable timing. Like, they, everybody just hit their marks and said their lines at the right time and everything. Like, you could tell that they had really good timing. They were all really good horse riders, which I guess was a prerequisite. In the 50s, they were shooting so many westerns back then. And it was really fun. The only thing sort of dodgy looking was the all the day for night shots. That's when they film outside during the day because they need the light so you can see the cowboys and the horses and all of that. And then they try and darken the picture a little bit just to make it look like it's night, and it always looks like, the biggest full moon ever, and it's it doesn't really work. But there's probably, with the lenses they had then, that was probably the only way to do it effectively. So you can't take away too many points for that. But all in all, a really fun family adventure. He's kind of the original superhero, I was thinking too, he guy with a mask. Well, there was Robin Hood, of course, as well. But I mean, this was really, as you said, the secret cave, just like Batman. I'm sure Batman was partly inspired by this. A lot of superheroes were, I'm sure.
Yeah, the mask and the cape.
Mm-hmm. The Lone Ranger, too, would be an early example of sort of a proto-superhero like that.
So tell me, how many masks of Zorro would you give this film?
I'll give it 4. It was pretty good, just, as I said, a couple of niggling things that made you realize you were watching a lower budget TV show occasionally, but a pretty good adventure, and it really does what it set out to do. What about you, Shannon? How many Zorro masks?
Definitely 4. Yes, I'll get 4 out of 5. Wasn't perfect, but it's a great swashbuckling adventure, and I love anybody who fights for the people. So, I guess that's all we have to say on the subject of Zorro.
Now, what are we going to do with this donkey? We'll see you next time on Random Movie Time.